We all love football for its drama, right? The passion, the absolute glorious unpredictability of it all. But what if that was a myth? What if every single match, every goal, could actually be broken down into cold, hard numbers?
That's the big question we're diving into today. Can an algorithm, a machine, really look into the future of the beautiful game and tell us what's going to happen?
So, I've got my hands on something really fascinating here. It's a broadcast data sheet from a system called the ATP Edge Matrix. It was put together for the African Cup of Nations, and it claims to be, and I'm quoting here, the scientific authority on predicting matches. So let's pop the hood and see what this thing is really all about.
Okay, so the system starts with its safest bets. These are the predictions it has the absolute highest confidence in. They call this category the banker. Pretty straightforward. First up, we've got Ivory Coast versus Mozambique. Now, the Matrix has a name for this one, the structural wall. Why? Because it sees this massive gap between the two. On one side, you have the powerhouse that is Ivory Coast, and on the other, you've got Mozambique, which the system immediately flags for having a critically low AEV. And get this, the system gives this matchup a confidence score of 0.91. That is huge. They don't just call it a banker. No, this gets the label ultra banker. In the world of this system, that is about as close to a mathematical certainty as you are ever going to get. So what on earth is this AEV? Well, it stands for Attack Efficiency Vector. Just think of it as a way to measure a team's offensive firepower, especially when they're not playing on their home turf. The Matrix says any score below 1.2 is a major red flag. And that's right where Mozambique is. And here's the crucial part, right from the analyst's notes. The system isn't just looking at the starting 11 players. Nope, it's digging deep and analyzing the entire professional depth of the squad. The thinking here is that even if Ivory Coast rests some of its stars, that fundamental gap in quality, that structural wall, is just too high for Mozambique to even think about climbing.
All right, so that was a pretty clear-cut case, but let's see how the system builds on this. Because it's not just about picking who will win. It also tries to predict how they'll win by finding these things it calls quality gaps.
So, our next example, Algeria versus Sudan, the verdict, an Algerian win, with over 1.5 goals in the game. But look closer at the stats. The system flags Sudan with the highest defensive decay rate, or DDR, of any team playing. And it also predicts something called a metabolic cooling phase. Sounds interesting, right? Okay, so what is this DDR? Defensive decay rate. Basically, it's a number that measures how fast a defense just falls apart when it's under constant, relentless pressure from a top-tier team. A high score, like Sudan's 4.8, is a massive warning sign that the floodgates could just burst open. But here is where it gets really smart. The system doesn't predict a 5-0 blowout. This quote explains that metabolic cooling thing. It's predicting that Algeria will go up 2-0, and then they'll just shut the engine down. They'll slow the game down to save energy for the rest of the tournament. So it's not just picking a winner, it's predicting the entire story of the match.
Okay, now for what might just be the most valuable part of a system like this. It's not just about telling you what to bet on, it's about telling you what not to bet on. Let's look at the system warning section, which is all about spotting the traps. And the trap game of the day is Cameroon versus Gabon. The reason why is absolutely fascinating. The Matrix flags this one for metabolic equilibrium, which means the teams are almost perfectly matched in strength and stamina. And it also sees a high mutual DDR, which means both defenses are just as likely to make a big mistake.
And here you can see how all those warning signs start to stack up. The confidence score drops to a 0.74, which puts it in the yellow flag zone. The official verdict from the machine is a draw, and it's all because of that equilibrium and the high risk that both defenses are just fragile.
And the source document is so direct about this. It calls this the tactical trap. It says the general public is just going to blindly bet on the bigger name, on Cameroon. But the data is screaming that these two teams are just going to cancel each other out, probably ending in a 1-1 or a 2-2 score.
So we have the sure things, the more nuanced wins, and the traps to stay away from. How does it all come together? Well, the document talks about building a data shield, using this science to protect your investment.
Let's look at the strategy here. It's a three-part approach. First, you have the double shield, where you combine the two safest bets, Ivory Coast and Algeria. Then you have the value pathway, where you add in a predicted low-scoring game, which they call a friction play. And finally, there's the quant long shot, using that predicted draw from the trap game as a calculated high-reward risk.
It's a whole portfolio built entirely from the data.
And this final message to the audience really just sums up the whole philosophy, doesn't it? It's a powerful call to action. It's basically saying, stop gambling with your emotions. Start investing with the science.
Which brings us all the way back to our big question. After seeing how this matrix breaks everything down, from structural walls to metabolic cooling, what do you think? Is this the future of how we analyze sports? A future where data is absolutely king? Or is this all just a very, very sophisticated new way to place a bet? Lot to think about there.